the reason this matters so much is that President Trump, as always, is desperately keen to show that he can achieve something, and if he can, quotes, get a deal, unquotes, on Ukrainian rare earths and minerals, he'll see that as a win.
So Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and top diplomat Marco Rubio have met with their European and Ukrainian counterparts in Paris to discuss efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The talks, hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron, formed the highest level of transatlantic engagement about the war since February. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Trump's envoy Witkoff of spreading Russian narratives and has also accused China of supplying Russia with artillery. Donald Trump's been speaking at the White House. He's still talking at the moment, actually. And he's just said that a minerals deal between the Ukraine and the US will be signed next Thursday.
Well, we have a minerals deal, which I guess is going to be signed on Thursday, Scott, next Thursday, soon. And I assume they're going to live up to the deal, so we'll see. But we have a deal on that.
Donald Trump speaking there in the last 10 minutes or so in the Oval Office at the White House. Let's speak to Leigh Turner, former British ambassador to Ukraine. Leigh, good evening.
Good evening, Kate.
Lots to take in tonight. We knew we might get more on Ukraine from Donald Trump, and he has delivered with the declaration that a minerals deal with Ukraine will finally get over the line next week, next Thursday, to be specific. I wonder where we're at with our thoughts on what kind of shape that deal might take.
Yeah, it's quite intriguing, isn't it? There's been a lot of discussion between Ukraine and the US about this proposed minerals deal, and the Ukrainians have complained several times that the US keep changing the terms of this deal. They've been ready to sign it for quite a while, actually. And we've just heard from both Zelensky, actually, and from Trump that the deal is more or less ready to sign. And what we're expecting is that it will give the US certain rights to develop so-called rare earths within Ukraine. But the important thing about this deal, Kate, is that it's largely symbolic, because there is at the moment no significant production of rare earths in Ukraine. It's all based on old Soviet-era maps of Ukraine that show where there may well be rare earths across the country. And to develop those resources is going to take years, if not decades. The reason this matters so much is that President Trump, as always, is desperately keen to show that he can achieve something, and if he can, quotes, get a deal, unquotes, on Ukrainian rare earths and minerals, he'll see that as a win.
Look, Trump, within the last 5-10 minutes or so, has said he's not a big fan of Zelensky. He says he doesn't hold Zelensky responsible for the war, but I'm not exactly thrilled, he said, with the fact that the war started. I'm not happy with him, not happy with anyone involved. I'm not blaming him, but what I'm saying is that I wouldn't say he's done the greatest job. I'm not a big fan. I mean, that is difficult, isn't it? It's not entirely off script, although Donald Trump does flip-flop a bit between sort of liking Zelensky and then speaking out against him. One thing he perhaps has done recently is he's not heaped as much praise on Vladimir Putin as he has done in recent times. But I mean, this is, considering he's about to sign a minerals deal with Ukraine next week, these are quite strong words, really, when you consider the diplomacy or lack of it all.
It's a strange way of going about negotiations, isn't it? To embrace one side and to keep saying how wonderful Putin is, and to give away to Putin all the main cards in your negotiations. For example, saying that Ukraine can never join NATO and can't get its land back before the negotiations have even started. And then to publicly disgrace Zelensky, not only in that infamous meeting in the White House, but also twice, actually. Trump has said that Zelensky shouldn't have started this war. He said it again this week, and now he's backpedaling. Probably somebody has pointed out that the war started in 2014, 5 years before
and it definitely wasn't
became president. And the idea that when country A invades country B, that's country B's fault, is absolutely a Russian talking point. Zelensky has a point. I mean, he's being a bit more careful now in that he's saying it's Steve Witkoff who is echoing Russian talking points. I mean, Witkoff has repeatedly said, what did he say about Putin? He's super smart. He's a great guy. He prayed for Trump after an assassination attempt last year, so he must be okay, right? And Witkoff has also supported Russian claims that Ukraine is not a real country, or that the 4 partially occupied regions in Ukraine who held referendums under Russian military rule want to be part of Russia, which is all straight out nonsense. So you can see why Zelensky is so frustrated about this. And Trump seems to just love flip-flopping on this kind of thing, keeping people off their balance, trying to make it difficult to negotiate with him by making it very hard to figure out what exactly he really wants.
Yeah, I mean, look, Donald Trump's very closely aligned with Steve Witkoff. Witkoff is a deal broker. He's a businessman. And you could say equally it's pretty dodgy territory for Zelensky to be offering up that Witkoff is spreading Russian narratives. Even if it is true, again, there is a deal to be signed next week, and Zelensky is desperate to try and get a ceasefire deal over the line. He doesn't need to be upsetting Donald Trump or Steve Witkoff. Both are major players in him trying to broker as good a ceasefire deal for Ukraine as possible, but also most importantly, to try and secure some sort of security assurance from the United States, as much as they're prepared to give. And we know that that's slightly shaky ground. But I guess, look, to be fair, we need to say that Vladimir Zelensky really shouldn't be making accusations like this, even if they're true to quite a great extent, about Steve Witkoff. On Russia, Donald Trump, and it's great that he's speaking, or has just spoken. Lots to bring you, lots of new information to bring you if you're listening at the moment here on Times Radio this evening. He was asked about Vladimir Putin and a deal. I think we're getting close, he says. We're going to be hearing from Russia this week, very shortly, actually. So that really means this evening or tomorrow, doesn't it, potentially? I know it's not the Easter weekend over in the US. They are still operating tomorrow. We want the death, we want the killing to stop, he says. So look, again, let's not overindulge, but that is something of an encouraging sentence from Donald Trump there.
Well, I think we've got to take that
Lee?
with a pinch of salt, Kate, to be honest. Since President Trump came to power, the US has put massive pressure on Ukraine to make concessions, and they've never put any pressure on Russia. And unless they start putting that pressure on Moscow, there's going to be no deal. There's lots of reasons for this, but just to summarize a couple of them. I mean, first of all, where is the landing zone for a deal? Between Russia and Ukraine, Russia wants Ukraine to cease to exist as a country, whereas Ukraine doesn't want to reward Russia with land for invading it. Nor is there a clear landing zone between Trump and Putin, because Trump keeps saying he wants a quick ceasefire. Putin is turning that round on him in a kind of judo aficionado's way, and saying, well, there's not going to be a ceasefire until we've agreed on everything else, where everything else means the future security architecture of Europe, a huge demand, and the future of Ukraine as an independent country. And you mentioned, Kate, these security guarantees. Europe, including the UK, is trying to put together some security guarantees in case there is a peace deal. But the US has rubbished that, including Steve Witkoff, who said this was posturing and posing. So, it's difficult to see where a deal is coming from unless and until the US shows its strength instead of its weakness in dealing with Russia. Because unless the US changes its position and puts pressure on Russia, Moscow is going to continue this war with more of these indiscriminate strikes on civilians we've seen. And it's easy to see what that pressure should be. First of all, the US should provide new arms to Ukraine. That would really bring Putin to the table. And secondly, they should put secondary sanctions on countries that import Russian oil. Both of those things would really hurt Russia, and that would speed things up a bit.
Yeah, OK. All right. An update on peacekeeping missions. Trump says peace missions are always good with me. I'm OK with peace missions. That's what he said this evening. And just to note that Zelensky has also accused China. He says he's got evidence that China is supplying weapons to the Russian Federation. We'll pick up more on that later. Sadly, I've run out of time for the moment. Leigh, so much to discuss. Leigh Turner, former British ambassador to Ukraine. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.